In the UK, the problem of nightmare neighbours has never been worse.
And he whomps me onto the ground.
My husband had blood all over his face, and I thought he was dead.
1 in 5 of us has been at war with next door.
The truth always comes out. Never forget that, scumbag.
Flaring tempers can turn home life into a living hell.
You have a baseball bat.
Is this gangster land now?
This time, the nightmare continues as we return to the neighbour disputes that just won't go away. In London, tempers continue to boil over the extension from hell.
Don't put your shit up against my fence.
In the Cotswolds, a conflict over money lent between friends gets dangerous.
Oh, is that Helen?
The engine was racing. She proceeded to drive straight towards Richard.
And how a love for badgers and music meant these people's neighbours wanted them to leave town. But have they?
I mean, we had a police helicopter here one night at 3 o'clock in the morning. What's that all about?
Some say money is the root of all evil, and in a Cotswolds village, a decision to lend money to a neighbour has ruined the lives of 2 families.
I'd like to ask Robert where my money is.
What they've done is wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong.
£50,000 of our life savings, our security in our old age.
And all because we were helping somebody. We thought we were helping somebody.
This dispute divided the community, but no one could have predicted what happened next.
Can we have a few words with you, please? Helen?
We would never have, in our wildest imaginations, believed that we'd be in a position of a police constable sitting in our home taking a witness statement. And Richard being the victim.
The story began in 2011 when Peter and Angela McSweeney had a visit from Robert Brown, the son of their neighbours. He had a proposition.
Robert's proposal was that he needed the money to start up a new business in Stratford-upon-Avon.
He wanted to borrow £50,000 for this new venture. The £50,000 came as quite a shock.
He assured us that he would pay it up as quickly as he possibly could. He shook hands with Peter and then off he went.
The McSweeneys had known Robert's parents, Peter and Helen Brown, for years, and they were more than just the people across the street.
When we first moved in, the Brown family were very friendly.
Helen Brown came over socially on many, many occasions, was always sort of ringing me up and saying, is everything all right? Don't forget, you can always call on me if there's anything needs doing. We trusted each other, absolutely.
Unbeknown to the McSweeneys, Robert Brown had also been to see Claire and Richard Mayman, who lived on the same road. They'd also agreed to lend Robert money for the Stratford Cafe, £70,000 in total.
There was a trust between us as decent people.
Both families believed they were making a good investment because Robert already ran a thriving cafe business in their village.
Robert Brown took on this business, called it Fox's, and we just watched him and the business work very successfully.
He drove a nice car, and we thought, well, wow, this is good for him.
But they made a big mistake. The Maymans and the McSweeneys trusted Robert's parents, so they weren't concerned when there was no proper paperwork.
These were personal, very personal arrangements with people that we trusted.
And the decision to loan money to their neighbour would come back to haunt both couples 18 months later, when they learned the Stratford Cafe they'd invested in was in trouble.
We were advised that the bailiffs had gone in.
But the Maymans and the McSweeneys, each family still unaware the other was involved, were walking headlong into financial disaster.
What they have done is wrong, totally immoral. They continue as though nothing has changed.
When it comes to arguments between neighbours, there's one issue that trumps all others: noise.
The nail gun, it was unbelievable. Chung, 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 chung.
Councils receive thousands of complaints about noisy neighbours every year. Neighbours like rapper Elvis Torresinza. When he moved to an East London estate in 2010, Elvis's pumping music drove his neighbours berserk.
It was severe bass. The bass was quite bad and it was horrendous music. The way he portrays himself and the way he acts makes me think that he is threatening. And that's why I've actually never gone round there.
But a year after the courts ordered him to hang up his mic, has anything really changed? He may be named after the king of rock and roll, but Elvis's music of choice is rap.
Situation messed up. Was mum's words early morning getting dressed up.
Ominously for his neighbours, the aspiring rapper wanted to record in the comfort of his own home.
Got myself a job and worked there for a few months, saved up a little bit of money, and I started buying my equipment.
Elvis was soon creating songs and uploading them to the internet in a bid to get noticed. And he certainly got noticed.
Sometimes it wouldn't start till 1 a.m, so you'd think, oh yeah, peace and quiet for one night. And then suddenly, when in bed, it would start and you'd be like, what?
Would you ever start the music at 1 a.m?
Never.
Elvis's neighbours began to complain, and he soon had the council on his back.
I opened up the door and he must have said to me that he must have had a complaint from a neighbour that I was playing loud music. Obviously, I turned down the music at the time.
But not enough to satisfy his neighbour.
Bass was a big problem, obviously, because it made your walls vibrate. Even in the bath, I could still hear the bass and feel it when my head was under the water. So even that didn't block out the sound.
The complaints kept on coming.
Probably 3-4 weeks later, I got a letter from the council saying that I had been causing a nuisance all through and I'm basically a music terrorist.
Not everyone on the estate thought it was a problem.
Well, obviously people are going to hear the music, so it probably vibrates through the walls, but it's never that loud, you know what I mean?
But after 82 complaints from other neighbours, in 2012, Elvis was hit with a noise abatement order.
I really didn't see the need to go to the council and start pointing fingers like they did to me.
But that didn't stop Elvis, and in September 2013, he was fined £1,000 after a court found him guilty of breaching his order. And the council made it clear what would happen if Elvis broke the order again.
I had to stop playing loud music, otherwise they was going to come to my house and take my equipment.
But for Elvis's neighbours, the nightmare wasn't over yet.
I was clever than them, you get me?
Coming up, the build from hell still causing all-out war between neighbours.
He's threatened to blow our house up. He's threatened to put bricks through our window.
And the Somerset woman who caused a siege gears up for action again.
If it does happen again, I'll be out there on the front line.
In East London, rowdy rapper Elvis had been ordered to turn down his music. When he continued to ignore warnings, the council took drastic action.
So as I'm walking in, I opened up my front room, walked in, and literally everything was gone. All my computer that was there, that was gone. I had a studio mixer over there, that was gone as well. And my mic stand was gone, I was standing over there.
But Elvis had anticipated their move.
Obviously the council must have thought, they took all my stuff, but obviously they didn't take my music recording stuff. Luckily, I was clever than them, you get me? I had moved my equipment to my brother's. I took my speakers, moved my monitors, and I took my mixer.
On this occasion, Elvis had stayed one step ahead of the council, and he soon returned his gear to the estate. but it would only be a matter of time before his musical misdemeanours caught up with him. It's now more than a year since Elvis was found guilty of breaching his order. And on the Dagenham estate, there's no rapping, no beats, and no Elvis. It seems he just couldn't give up his musical habit, and on the 13th of May 2014, Elvis was evicted for noise nuisance and rent arrears. His neighbours finally had the peace and quiet they'd been craving.
I lead a much happier life. Now I can go to work, come home, relax and go to bed when I want.
Elvis was unavailable for comment, but it seems this time he really has left the building. The huge cost of moving home means record numbers of people are choosing to build loft conversions or extensions instead, but few consider the impact on their neighbours. When North London homeowner Tariq Ahmed turned his house from this into this, the neighbours on either side were up in arms.
He had no intention of listening to anything we had to say, and as far as I was concerned, the only people that would be able to stop him were the courts.
4 years on, I'm absolutely sick and tired of talking about it.
Tony and Veronica Martin lived on one side of this three-way dispute. Next door to them was Mr. Ahmed, and on the other side of him was the detached home of Helen Corlin. Initially, the three neighbours got along well, but then Mr. Ahmed announced a plan to improve his home.
I got an email saying that he wanted to dig within 3 metres of our property and said that the builder would be sending me some plans.
The first Helen knew of the plans was when Mr. Ahmed turned up at her door holding a magazine.
On the front of the magazine was a white double-fronted house, which he then told me he was going to proceed to make next door into.
It was clear that Mr. Ahmed's plans involved greatly increasing the size of his 3-bedroom end terrace to the rear and to the side.
In his own mind, he was going to make this into an enormous palace that should have been sitting in an acre of land.
Much to Helen's alarm, Mr. Ahmed's grand design meant his extension would go right up to her boundary wall.
I was asking how I was meant to get in and out of my front door and my back door without any danger.
Concerned by his ambitious plans, Helen went to talk to her neighbour, Mr. Ahmed.
I tried to explain to him that we had a right to light and that the fact is that he would be blocking all our light out, and so he had would not be able to do it.
When we first met the neighbours, Mr. Ahmed declined to tell his side of the story, but according to Helen, his reaction to her objection was far from friendly.
Mr. Ahmed's reply is to start swearing and cursing and threatening, and that's when I said to him, do ourselves all a favour, we will do this the legal way and then we won't have to talk to each other.
Helen told the council that Mr. Ahmed's plans infringed her right to light, but they told her it was a private matter.
I realised that they were going to pass these plans, and it was a nightmare beginning to brew up inside of me.
Within days, the building work had begun, and Mr. Ahmed's neighbours were worried by what they saw.
They weren't what I would class as builders. There was no health and safety, there was no high-vis jackets, no hard hats, chaotic.
At the centre of it all, directing the work, was Mr. Ahmed himself.
He would strut around like a peacock. He's got the voice, and he'd make sure that everybody heard it.
He just walks around so much like a cross between Del Boy and Ali G.
As Mr. Ahmed's extension grew, Helen's worst fears about light were realised.
You never seem to get the sunshine or the warmth into the house anymore on a nice day. You sort of always feel like it's winter.
Her once light and airy house was now shrouded in darkness.
Every day now, I can't even come into this room without having to put lights on.
And the distance separating the two houses was just a few feet, or the length of Helen's mum's walking stick. The work hadn't been signed off by building regulations, and in Helen's opinion, it was unsafe.
The wall's so dangerous, and we're just left living this nightmare, aren't we, Mum?
Yes, definitely.
They weren't the only ones. On the other side of Mr. Ahmed, the Martins were about to get a nasty shock.
And the first thing I immediately saw was a huge crack, which literally went right across the whole hall. It just looked like it went on forever. So I come into my daughter's room, and the crack went right along the top and all the way down the window. I was absolutely furious. I went running down the stairs to Mr. Ahmed and his builders, who were outside talking to my wife, and called them all in. They just went, oh. And I said, well, you've got to be, what have you done? Just said, well, we'll fix it. But he just couldn't get the magnitude of the whole thing. And it was just no remorse. It was like, what, so what?
And it seemed Mr. Ahmed also had some help with building techniques from an unusual source.
The work was being carried out by Mr. Ahmed and his mates using self-help YouTube videos.
Well, that's pathetic. It's as simple as that. That's the first I've heard that he used self-help videos to build a house.
No, I knew he went onto the internet. He told me he'd searched on the internet.
I find it absolutely astonishing that I'm gobsmacked at that.
It was a terrifying situation for both sets of neighbours, and little did they know the nightmare was far from over. In Britain, 13 million households own a pet. But while we adore our animals, our neighbours don't.
For hell's sake, they're birds. They're going to make noise, It's not like they're cockerels.
From yapping dogs to clucking hens, animals are a factor in over 20% of neighbour disputes. But in one rural village, it wasn't the animals that were the problem. It was the woman trying to protect them.
I'm quite proud to have a caution for badgers. Not a problem.
In summer 2013, Meg Sunningdale made herself unpopular with her neighbours when she took up a campaign to protect badgers from the government cull.
People would drive along here mouthing evil bitch.
With most of the village against her, she reluctantly decided it was time to go. Meg has always dreamt of countryside life due to her love of all living things.
I feel as if I'm part of nature. Everything I do, everything I plant, has to be beneficial for wildlife. And this is my fruit cage, which has always been shared by ducks, and the ducks have been very safe from foxes here. I do feel that animals need a spokesperson. They don't have rights. This area I feed the pheasants because I try to keep them off the hill where they're shot.
Why do you love animals so much?
I don't know. It's like asking somebody why they believe in God, isn't it?
Soon after moving to the Somerset village of Withycombe, one type of animal gained a particular place in Meg's heart.
In my life, I hadn't seen a badger, but I had badgers on my doorstep. I felt so privileged because not many people in this country ever see a live badger.
Meg encouraged the badgers to her garden with food and developed a bond with them.
They knew my smell, and if there's anybody else here, they wouldn't come near the door.
But Meg was about to get a nasty shock. The government were concerned about the spread of tuberculosis in cattle, And as badgers are thought to carry the disease, they decided to embark on a cull.
We just didn't believe it. We couldn't believe that human beings would be prepared to do that.
Meg wanted to make an issue about it, which she definitely made an issue.
When she discovered one of her neighbours was allegedly involved in the cull, Meg did something that would have dire consequences for the village.
I just couldn't believe that he would be part of a badger cull. And my natural instinct was to name and shame this person.
Meg put a poster on her gate naming the alleged shooter, and within days the press had picked up on the story.
Couldn't believe that someone would be that, I don't know, stupid to actually do that. It was unbelievable.
With his name all over the press, the alleged shooter was left fearing for his safety.
I mean, he was that frightened for his family, his wife and children, that he moved them out of the village.
Animal rights protesters began to descend on Withycombe, determined to disrupt the cull.
This is the gate that a lot of protesters would have had to open and walk through to this Withycombe Wood. Our main aim was to be a presence. And if we were there, the shooters couldn't be. They weren't allowed to shoot too close to a person or a public footpath.
That is the cover where all the protesters were kicking off. Then they used to congregate under that big oak tree. They didn't normally start until probably 2:30 in the morning. Just give you time to get to sleep. Started off with the lights, whistle, air horns. I don't need them out there keeping me awake every night. Quite loud.
No, it needs to be.
Meg had started a siege, and there was no sign of peace returning to Withycombe.
What they thought they were achieving, I do not know. But what they did achieve was to certainly piss us off along here.
Still to come, road rage in the Cotswolds as the dispute hits a terrifying new level.
She purposefully drove the car in a straight line towards Richard.
And after a nightmare extension next door, neighbours fight back.
And by the end of that day, I had made the phone call and I had started the enforcement action.
In Somerset, Meg Sunningdale was besotted with badgers, and in an effort to stop them being shot, she'd brought scores of protesters to her village. But her actions caused outrage, and by the time the cull ended 6 weeks later, Meg's reputation in Withycombe was in tatters.
I became nervous, I became more self-conscious, I didn't really want to be seen.
So by September 2013, she decided to up sticks and leave the village.
We will have to move, we can't stay with a really bad atmosphere, can we?
At the time, some felt it was a case of good riddance.
She's come in, stirred it all up, caused plenty of trouble, and move off.
But 1 year on, Meg has decided that she's not ready to say goodbye to the charms of Withycombe just yet, and her house is now off the market. Although all is quiet in the village for now, further culls are scheduled for the area, and Meg's always been very clear about her stance on the issue.
I will certainly do my utmost to prevent another cull ever happening again, and if it does happen again, I'll be out there on the front line.
In the Cotswolds, Peter and Angela McSweeney had loaned £50,000 of their life savings to neighbour Robert Brown, and were reassured by his mother Helen that their money was safe.
You'll get your money back, even if I have to sell my house, was the promise she made.
But 18 months later, the McSweeneys had a visit from Robert's father and soon realised their investment was in peril.
So I opened the door, and Peter Brown was in quite an agitated state. He said, we've got problems. He said, the bailiffs are in at Foxy Brown's. So he said, I need some money.
The McSweeneys refused to give the Browns any more money and demanded a formal meeting.
I needed to check legally to see that we had a contract really which was a valid one. Robert stood up in unison with his father. It was as though they were acting out a play.
And said, if you take legal action, you will get nothing.
Over the road, the Maymans were equally worried about their money.
We hadn't got legally binding documents. What chance there was of getting our money back? Minimal. I think then the realisation of what we'd got into hit home.
And living in the same village as the Browns, they had no escape.
This is Robert Brown.
That is Robert Brown.
One evening, the stress of the situation boiled over. Wanting to show the Browns how she was feeling, Claire parked outside their house and sat there revving her engine.
I suppose all my anger was being roared out of this poor car's engine. Long enough to make me feel a bit better, long enough to see Robert's parents running from window to door to door to window to try and work out who and what was going on the drive in front of their house. It gave me a small release. It was like an elastic band snapping. Something had just made me very, very angry.
By now, the Maymans and the McSweeneys had discovered each other was involved. But their hopes of getting any money back were dealt another blow in March 2013, when Robert Brown went bankrupt.
Borrow at somebody else's expense, and then go bankrupt and be absolved of all your responsibilities to your creditors. How fair is that?
But things were about to take a much darker turn. With Robert bankrupt, ownership of the Broadway Cafe appeared to pass to family friends.
Come on, we better hurry, otherwise they'll be gone.
But in November 2013, Peter McSweeney and Richard Mayman were in the village when they caught sight of Helen in the cafe's car park.
We decided that it might be a good opportunity on the spur of the moment to actually have a word with her.
Hi, is that Helen? Helen, Richard here. We're making a programme.
Yeah, good luck to you, Richard.
What happened next couldn't be shown until now, and it changed the course of the whole dispute.
It all happened in a fraction of a second.
Helen, can we have a few words with you, please? Helen?
Richard again attempted to ask her whether she would be prepared to say something concerning her son's death. I thought that she was departing from the car park, and that would have been the end of it. But instead of exiting the car park, she proceeded to drive straight towards Richard. And she left the braking to the very last moment. She's laughing, so she's obviously very happy about things. And as she departed from the car park, she was seen to be smiling, smirking. Yes, it's a big joke. What fun. Who would go out laughing, drive out laughing, after an incident like that?
In the immediate aftermath, Richard and Peter were left reeling.
To think that the situation has got to the stage of her driving her car at me it leaves me speechless. We'll just have to see where this now leads. It's very unfortunate. The whole episode has been very unfortunate.
You're a brave man, Richard.
Helen's car had made contact with Richard's leg, and although he was unhurt, he decided to report the incident to the police.
And they decided that with the evidence and the witnesses that were present, that there was a strong case for actually taking it to court.
And any hope of a resolution between the families was now long gone.
The forthcoming court case did nothing for our feelings towards the Brown family. The animosity was almost palpable.
In North London, Tariq Ahmed's neighbours were up in arms over his imposing extension.
It makes me feel totally claustrophobic, and I literally feel like the walls are coming in on me.
Cracks in neighbourly relations were growing by the minute.
As soon as Veronica saw this, she screamed because she thought the whole house was going to fall down.
For both sets of neighbours, enough was enough. And when Helen refused to allow Mr. Ahmed to put scaffolding up on her property, the gloves were off.
Mr. Ahmed has threatened me to a degree that he has told me I should watch my back.
Helen wasn't alone.
He's threatened to blow our house up. He's threatened to put bricks through our window.
Mr. Ahmed claims these were nothing more than empty threats, but despite the intimidation, Helen refused to give up.
We did a right to light survey, which was paid for by my insurance company and their legal team, and we took it to the court, and from our local court it was sent straight up to the High Court.
After 2.5 years of misery, it seemed she finally had some resolution.
And he gave me an out-of-court settlement of £30,000 in damages and £7,500 in legal costs.
It's now 18 months since the court settlement, and it seems the sweet taste of victory has soured. While Mr. Ahmed paid the majority of the money owed to Helen in instalments, there was a dispute over interest, which Mr. Ahmed didn't believe he owed. Helen was having none of it.
So by this time I said, don't worry, I'm going to do this my way now, because I was just fuming. And by the end of that day, I had made the phone call and I had started the enforcement action.
With over £2,500 still owed to Helen, court sheriffs were instructed to collect the money.
I was away, and my friend across the road texted me that the High Court enforcement officers had arrived, and they were then manoeuvring their vehicle, and so that he could not get out of his driveway. They refused to move their vehicle and stated that if he didn't pay up, they would then seize, ready to auction, his vehicle. With that, he then paid the bill and they were able to go away and successfully finish my business.
Mr. Ahmed disputes some of this story. He says there was only one officer and his car was not blocked in. He did, however, pay up, and it's not the only progress Helen has made.
This all started about 5 or 6 weeks ago, so it's all quite new for us as well at the moment, and we're just still getting used to it.
Helen's insurers have repaired the damage caused to her house by her neighbour's build. Mr. Ahmed insists he was always going to do the rendering, but Helen scared his builders away. He says he was happy to pay her insurers for the work.
As you can see here, the wall now all blends into our porch. It looks a lot cleaner, the lines are a lot better, and it's made us all feel a lot better as well, that we're not looking at that awful breeze block anymore.
But on the other side of Mr. Ahmed, it's a different story. On 2 occasions, the cracks upstairs have been repaired by a builder who was chosen by the Martins and paid for by Mr. Ahmed. But they've recently come back again.
Having had it repaired and seeing them come back, it was like a nightmare again. So we're just thinking, no, please don't come back.
We have been advised by Mr. Ahmed's agent, his surveyor, that they're only cosmetic cracks. But I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm not sure if it's sound, if the property next door isn't moving.
But because it's where the damage was occasioned, you just think it sets off alarm bells.
Mr. Ahmed says that as the Martins chose the builders to repair the cracks, it's them they should talk to. But the problems aren't just inside the Martins' house.
The loft is built on the party wall, but as you can see, the beam sticks out.
Mr. Ahmed insists that while the beam may still be sticking out, it is on his side of the party wall, something Tony disputes.
Both the party wall surveyors agreed that there was encroachment and it needed to be cut back, but it's still there 4 years on.
With Mr. Ahmed's build still awaiting final sign-off from the council, his neighbours are worried a whole new nightmare awaits them.
It could all land up that it's all going to have to be back into a building site again.
Still to come, Mr. Ahmed's neighbours make their feelings clear.
Don't put your shit up against my fence.
And in the Cotswolds, warring neighbours finally face each other in court.
I just didn't want to look at her. Full stop.
In a quiet Cotswolds village, a financial dispute between neighbours had suddenly turned physical.
And the horror that such a story could happen actually in Broadway.
Having driven her car at Richard Mayman, Helen Brown was now facing criminal charges. And in August 2014, the case was heard at Worcester Magistrates Court.
Arrived in the court and was led to the witness box. I was mindful not to show any weakness or nerves.
For the first time in months, Peter was face to face with the neighbour he'd once called a friend.
I was conscious of the fact that she was probably looking at me, and I really didn't want to give her the satisfaction of me looking at her. I just didn't want to look at her. Full stop.
After a 2-day court hearing, Helen Brown was found guilty of assault by beating. As well as receiving a criminal record, she was also ordered to pay £585 in fines and costs.
Without achieving the conviction, it would have been devastating to us. It would have just been another nail in the coffin.
But the victory in court has done little to heal the financial wounds.
In the overall scheme of things, we were still suffering the loss of our money.
The official receiver has been involved, and efforts are being made to recover some money for Robert's creditors. The Brown family home is for sale. However, it's unlikely the McSweeneys or Maymans will benefit.
It's late fall, really, isn't it?
We were unsecured lenders of money, and the secured lenders always come first. So our situation looks particularly bleak.
Of the £120,000 loaned by the two families, Robert paid back just under £13,500 before bankruptcy. Although he's no longer registered as bankrupt, Robert hasn't paid any more money to the families.
We will be able to draw a line under all of this when we see the Browns depart, and not before.
In North London, the Martins and Helen Corlin are united in the anger they feel over their neighbour's extension.
For yourself and us, we haven't caused any of this.
No.
And we are just the victims.
Total victims in this. Make sure you are insured up to the hilt, because you never know what's going to happen next door to you.
At the front, the build appears finished. But at the back, an alleyway shared by several houses on the street is another thorny issue. Mr. Ahmed says he's already cleared any building debris that was blocking access for his neighbours. Tony disagrees.
There was some rubble taken away, but obviously he's left the bulk of it, and because we can't get to our garage and to our fence, this has just grown up.
Mr. Ahmed has told us his wife has recently cut the grass in front of Tony's garage, but the neighbour whose house backs onto Mr. Ahmed's has made his feelings about the rubble very clear.
He's put a very polite notice which makes it quite clear that he doesn't want the rubble or any more of Mr. Ahmed's rubbish leaning against his fence.
Don't put your S up against my fence. in 3 signs all the way along the fence, and I cannot blame them at all because they've had to incur all the costs and the rubble is still up against their new fence.
Surrounded by angry neighbours, Tony reckons Mr. Ahmed is now keeping a low profile.
About 2 months ago, I was taking my eldest daughter to hockey. About 7:30 at night, we come out, we just got in the car, and just as I was going to start the car, Mr. Ahmed pulled up in his Mercedes, saw that we was in our car, so therefore he reached over to his driver's glove compartment and literally laid across the car like that. So we sat in our car for 10 minutes. All the time he was laying across the front seat. Well, if that's not trying to avoid someone, I don't know what is.
Mr. Ahmed flatly denies hiding and says, why would he want to?
If it was funny, then I would laugh, but it's not. We are trying to get our property fixed.
Mr. Ahmed's build has yet to be signed off by building control, and until it is, some serious questions remain unanswered.
I'd like confirmation that their property is structurally sound. Yeah, and that it wouldn't cause any more damage to our property. That everything's been done according to the rules and regulations, basically.
It's all in the plans of the council now and the building regulations. If they find it to be safe, I will be very, very surprised because I watched it go up.
If the council do find the property unsafe, Mr. Ahmed's neighbours could face many more months of noise, dirt and disruption.
I feel it will have to be demolished. I just don't know if we're going to be able to cope with the massive mess and the danger of coming down brick by brick.
A dark cloud continues to hang over Mr. Ahmed's neighbours.
To summarise how I feel at the moment, with no other work done, it makes me feel very, very angry, very annoyed, and very, very frustrated.
But in a final twist, there's a new building project in town. Only this time, it's Helen in charge. She's working with developers who are hoping to build a house on land at the bottom of her garden.
And I might actually be a raving lunatic to say that I want to do this, but I'd like to show how things can be done properly without upsetting everybody else in the road.
Have you been the victim of a nightmare neighbour? Or has your neighbour complained about your behaviour? If you'd like to tell us your story, go to channel5.com/nightmare neighbours.
Journalist Paul Connolly puts on his best suit to catch out those getting married to stay in the country. That's new sham wedding crashers tomorrow at 9. Next tonight, something suspicious in Docklands makes the officers call for backup. If you can't pay, we'll take it away.